Welcome and thank you so much for joining us today. We are so excited about voting this election. We know we are powerful when we show up, and we're looking forward to showing the entire country what that looks like. And we want to spread that excitement far and wide as we head into the final days of this election. At Care in Action, we are an organization that focuses on building the power of women of color in our politics and advocating for the policies that lift up our nation's caregivers and domestic workers. With just a few days left, everything is on the line.
This election is enormously important because half of the people in this country, including many, many, many domestic workers, are working paycheck to paycheck, living paycheck to paycheck. They're earning starvation wages. They have no health care or inadequate health care. They are not prepared for retirement. And what we need is a government and governmental policies which start addressing the enormous economic crises facing working families. So for domestic workers, it means we have got to recognize that the work you're doing is real, it is important, and you are entitled to the same legal protections that other workers receive.
So many of the issues that the senator just mentioned are issues that go to the heart of the experiences of domestic workers, caregivers, women of color. Lucha, can you share a little bit about your experience as a domestic worker, but in general, just share a little bit about your experience and what changes you want to see in your life coming out of this election?
My name is Lucha Silva. I'm a home care worker. I've done this type of work for over 25 years. And one of the things is, I feel so passionate about this work, and I do it for nothing, but I'd really like to be making a livable a livable wage. So that's one of the things that I hope to see out of this election is that the federal domestic worker bill of rights gets passed, where we can actually and gets implemented. We have a base level of $15 per hour. It dedicated, intimate work, and we deserve that. We're putting ourselves at risk. We have PPE most of the time, but if we get sick in the process of our work, we'll need that access to care so that we can continue to do our job. And it's taking some of our caregivers out. This pandemic is taking not only the seniors but our workers out, and so we need really all hands on deck. And one of the things that I wanted to make sure to mention was that we need a path to legalization for undocumented workers. They are doing the work, but they don't have the protections of from wage theft or from abuse. And so that's one of the things that those are the things that I'm really concerned about.
Ms. Priscilla, you live in North Carolina, very important state. Can you share a little bit about your experience and the kind of care economy that you want to be a part of as a home care worker? And also, what is keeping you up at night these days?
What keeps me up at night is knowing that here in North Carolina, in the healthcare field, racism, prejudice, just unjust to clients, not receiving adequate care because of inadequate hours that is given to the care workers such as myself, having to work 2 or 3 clients just to make a paycheck to try to earn a living wage, because one client will not give you a living wage. So worrying about my bills at night, worrying about whether or not my sick daughter is going to have adequate health care when I take her to the hospital, no matter which hospital it is, worry about whether or not, because the color of her skin, is she going to be treated fairly. And unfortunately, my experience here in North Carolina have showed me that because of the color of her skin and because of the fact that she has a disability, And because care workers are looked at as less than,
Mhm.
it's not going to happen. So, what I look forward to seeing out of this election is fair pay. Pay to where I don't have to work 80 hours a week just to make a paycheck, to pay my bills and to make sure that she has prescriptions, food on the table, traveling fees back and forth to the hospital, to make sure that I can get to work, um, and be able to take care of myself so I can properly be healthy enough.
There is no fairness in it, and it's been unjust for so, so long. A long, long history of exclusion and mistreatment. And it created a context where all of the women of color and everyone working in this industry came into the pandemic with so much insecurity. And now it's like a full-blown depression for our workforce, where so many people are unemployed as others continue to work under dangerous conditions, underpaid. And we've been thinking about that as a movement. What does that mean for the elections? What does it mean when people are in so much pain right now? Are they going to be reluctant to prioritize voting this election cycle because there's so much that they're juggling and struggling with right now? And so I want to hear from the three of you, starting with Senator Sanders, to the people who are struggling in the context of the pandemic and the economic crisis that it has catalyzed, who may be thinking that the last thing they want to prioritize is voting. What would you say to them about why it's actually the most important thing to prioritize?
I know that if people are working as our workers here today, as Lucha and Priscilla are, long, long hours, they're going to say, oh my God, it's going to take me an hour to vote. That's the last thing I got to do. But we got to do it. And let me just give you, Arjan, one example of what I mean by that. We were unable to pass an emergency COVID-19 relief package for unemployed workers and those workers who have been impacted, as many domestic workers have, by the pandemic. The first order of business, not the second, not the third, the first order of business for a Democratic Congress will be to pass a very, very strong emergency relief bill. What does that mean? It means that if you have lost your job and are now on unemployment, you're going to get an additional $600 a week on top of your unemployment. That's a reason to come out and vote. It means that if you've lost your health care, you're going to get health care. It means that we're going to protect you from being evicted from your home. It means that we're going to help cities and towns so they don't lay off workers, and states as well. It means that as the session progresses, we are going to raise that minimum wage to $15 an hour, expand healthcare, which I hear from Priscilla and Lucha is a major, major issue. All right. That is why it is worth taking an hour of your time to go out and vote, because it'll have some very tangible impacts on your lives and your coworkers' lives.
Like I told someone else today prior to this interview, we have to educate, number one. Um, I moved to Durham, North Carolina over 6 years ago. And before then, I was not in any politics. I didn't care about voting or anything because I did not believe that it affected my everyday life. But through education, I learned how much voting does impact my everyday life, how it impacts Medicare, Medicaid extension for all, how it impacts my children's schools, the school buses, even the very roads that we ride on, how it affects what hospital I'm able to go to, whether or not there's a hospital in the town that I
That's
live, just how it impacts whether or not my adopted 2-year-old has daycare, whether or not the daycare teachers are able to come out and do their job.
I think that in recent years, the work and the workers are now becoming more visible. They cannot and must not be left behind. They are entitled to every benefit that every other worker in America receives. And that is, they're entitled to health care. They're entitled to unemployment. They're entitled to time and a half. They're entitled to paid family and medical leave, which is what we're fighting for as well. If somebody in America has a baby, they should be able to stay home for a while with that baby, not be forced to come back to work. They're entitled to decent wages. So our struggle is to redefine what important work is in America.
And we know that in order for democracy to work for us, it has to include us. Through our voter hub at careinaction.us/vote, we're offering women of color the resources to make a plan to vote and to stay safe if we choose to vote in person. We believe that voting shouldn't be difficult. Women of color have options, and we're going to make voting work for us. We're answering voter questions, from how to report voter suppression to how to track our mail-in ballots, all very important things. We're going to be answering those questions in real time through our voter conversation bot. And the way you can get on it is by just DMing Care in Action on Twitter and Facebook, and we'll get your answers right away. We're also texting and calling millions of women of color to let them know that their vote counts. And if you can't vote, your voice is still so important this election season. Do not underestimate your own power to organize your friends, your family, and your community so that they vote, and they vote with you in their hearts. Voting is one way to make a difference in our lives and communities and reimagine a future that works for domestic workers, caregivers, women of color, and all of us. This election will determine how we support caregivers, workers, and our families for years to come. And it's a powerful way for the voices of domestic workers and family caregivers to be heard. So if you can't vote, again, these decisions that elected officials make, they still affect you. Getting involved doesn't just mean casting a ballot, right? You can make a difference by organizing your community, your family, who will vote with you in their hearts. So for all of you out there, if you want to fight for an America that cares for the people who care for us, then text CARE, C-A-R-E, to 97779 and pledge your organizing power.
Just go vote.